Hello, this is the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Thank you so much for tuning into this video in which we will review everything you need to know for your upcoming test. So this test will just be on converting, specifically converting between types of fractions, percentages, and decimals. So there's no arithmetic, no adding or subtracting fractions or anything like that. So let's start off by going through what a fraction actually is. So let's say we have a pizza here, and you can see I've shaded in some of it. So each of these is supposed to be the same size. Sorry about my poor drawing. So what fraction of this is shaded? Well, you can see there are 4 parts in total, and 3 of them are shaded. So we write it like this: 3/4 or 3/4 of the pizza is left. 3/4 is remaining. So fractions are always written like this, with a division line here. This is called the vinculum. It means divide. 3 divided by 4. The number on top is called the numerator, and the number on the bottom is the denominator. The numerator tells us how many parts we have, the denominator how many parts in total. So out of 4 parts, or 4 slices of the pizza in total, we still have 3 of them. So that's what fractions are. Now, they actually are numbers that are not quite wholes. So 3/4 is less than a whole pizza. You can see that here. So if we look at our number line here, 3/4 is going to be somewhere between 0 and 1. So if the number line has 1, 2, 3, 4 divisions, it's divided into quarters. Remember, we don't count 0 as one of the divisions, we do count 1. So there are 4 divisions between 0 and 1, not including 0. So this number line is divided into quarters. So we would have 1/4 here, 2/4 will be the next one, and then we'll have 3/4. Now, you can have fractions that are more than 1. So 1 is the same as 4/4. 4/4 would be a whole pizza if I had all 4 slices. And we can also have 5/4. That's called an improper fraction. We can also have negative fractions. So this next one will be -1/4. So -1/4 is more than -1, but it's less than 0. As we go to the right, numbers are getting larger. So 5/4 is more than 3/4, for example. So you probably know that halfway between 0 and 1 is actually a half. So a half would be right here on the number line. See, a half and 2/4 are what we call equivalent fractions. They are equal to each other. They have the same value. You can see this in the pizza here. If I were to give you half of the pizza, I would give you this much. You would get 1/2. So a half and a quarter, they're equivalent. They occupy the same position on the number line. But why are they equal? Well, it turns out 2 fractions are equal if you do the same to the top and the bottom. By same, I mean you multiply or divide the top and bottom by the same number. So if I multiply the top by 2 and the bottom by 2, I get 2/4. That's why they're equal, because we've done the same to the top as we've done to the bottom. On the other hand, if I were to look at fractions like 1/3 and 2/9, these fractions are not equal, because I've times the top there by 2, but I've times the bottom by 3. So to get equivalent fractions that have the same value, what you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. What you do to the top, you must do to the bottom. So equivalent fractions are very useful for simplifying and also comparing fractions. So let's look at these now. So when we're asked to simplify a fraction, we are asked to find an equivalent fraction with the lowest possible numerator, top number, and denominator, bottom number. So how do you actually simplify a fraction? Well, what you do is you divide top and bottom by the highest common factor. If you take a fraction, you can times or divide the top number by anything you want, as long as what you do to the top, you do to the bottom. So we have 2 numbers here, 6 and 15. Their highest common factor is 3. 3 is the highest number that goes into 6 and also goes to 15. So if I divide the top by 3, 6 divided by 3, I get 2. But what you do to the top, you must do to the bottom. So if I divide the top by 3, I must divide the bottom by 3. I'm left with 15 divided 3 is 5. So 6 over 15 and 2 over 5 are equivalent. They're both equal to 0.4. They're at the same position on the number line. So let's look at 24 over 36. We're going to simplify it. So what we're going to do is divide top and bottom by their highest common factor. The highest number that goes into 24 and also goes into 36 is 12. So what you do to the top, you must do to the bottom. So 24 divided by 12 is 2, 36 divided 12 is 3. 24 over 36 and 2/3 are equivalent fractions. If I gave you 24/36 of a pizza, you would get the same amount as if I gave you 2/3 of a pizza. But this fraction is said to be simplified because it has a lower numerator and a lower denominator. 2/3 is just simpler to understand than 24 over 36. So what about 18 over 81? Let's simplify it. So the highest number that goes into 18 and 81 is actually 9. So I'm going to divide top by 9. What you do to the top, you must do to the bottom. So 18 divided 9 is 2. 81 divided 9 is 9. 18 over 81, 2 over 9, they are equivalent fractions. They have exactly the same value. So if you're stuck with highest common factor, go through the factors of the smaller number like 18 and just find which of them go into 81. A problem I've been noticing as well, this might help you with that, is that odd numbers only have odd factors. So 81, for example, cannot have an even factor. I'm not going to divide 81 by an even number. It will have no even factors. So factors of 18, you choose 18. Well, 18 doesn't go into 81. The next highest factor of 18 is 9. 9 does go into 81. That's how I knew that 9 was the highest common factor. All right, let's now look at comparing fractions. So when we're comparing fractions, we're really deciding which fraction is larger, which fraction is smaller. So if I have 1/3 and 1/4, they're very easy to compare because they have the same numerator. So 1/3 or 1/4, which is larger? Well, think of our pizza again. If I divide the pizza in 3, there's going to be more than if I divide it into quarters, into fourths. If you get 1/3 of a pizza, you'll get more than if you get 1/4 of a pizza. So 1/3 is larger. So remember when we're finding the right symbol, crocodile eats the larger number. We think of this as a crocodile's mouth, and it wants to eat the larger number. 1/3 is greater than 1/4. Comparing fractions like 8 over 15 and 11 over 20 is tough because they have a different numerator and a different denominator. How can we compare them easily? Well, we use equivalent fractions. What we're going to do is we're going to find an equivalent fraction of this and of this that have the same denominator. So what am I going to make the denominator? Well, I'm going to make it a number that's divisible by 20 and divisible by 15. So hopefully that makes you think lowest common multiple. So the lowest common multiple of 15 and 20 is actually 60. 60 is the lowest number divisible by 20 and also divisible by 15. So if you're stuck with that, go through multiples of the larger number until you get one that's a multiple of the other. So 20 is not divisible by 15. Next multiple of 20 is 40. 40 is not divisible by 15. But 60 is divisible by 15. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make each of these have an equivalent fraction with denominator 60. I chose 60 because it's the lowest common multiple of 15 and 20. So how do I get from 15 to 60? Well, I need to times by 4. So the rule of fractions, equivalent fractions, is what you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. If I times the bottom by 4, I must times the top by 4. So 8 over 15 is 32 over 60. So similarly for this one, to go from 20 to 60, I need to multiply by 3. What I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. So you can see 11 times 3 is 33. 33 over 60 is clearly larger than 32 over 60 because they have the same denominator, but this has a larger numerator. So which symbol will I put? Crocodile eats the larger number. So this is the crocodile's mouth. It wants to eat the larger number. So just remember, this says 8 over 15 is less than 11 over 20, which is true. So let's try this one. Which fraction is halfway between a quarter and a sixth? It's actually not a fifth, as a lot of people think. So what is the fraction halfway between these two then? Turns out the answer is not obvious at all. What I'm going to do here is use equivalent fraction. I'm going to times, when I'm looking for a fraction halfway between, I'm going to times top and bottom of this fraction by the denominator of the other fraction. So top and bottom by 6. Here I'm going to times top and bottom by 4, denominator of the other fraction. So what you do to the top, you must do to the bottom. See, 1/4 is the same as 6 over 24. 1/6 is the same as 4 over 24. So halfway between them is actually 5 over 24. That wasn't obvious at all. But when you're finding a fraction halfway between two others, make sure you use equivalent fractions with same denominator, and then it'll be easy to find halfway between. All right, let's now look at mixed numbers and improper fractions. So mixed numbers are where you have a whole number part and a fraction part. Improper fractions where you have a higher numerator than a denominator. Both of these numbers, as are all mixed numbers and improper fractions, they are greater than 1, more than 1 whole. So we need to be able to convert between these two. For every mixed number, you can write it as an improper fraction. So what you do is take the whole number and times by the denominator, then you add the numerator. 3 times 5 is 15. Plus 2 is 17. So the new numerator becomes 17. You always keep the same denominator. 3 and 2/5, 17 over 5 are equivalent. Both equal to 3.4. They'd be at the same position on the number line. Sometimes mixed numbers are easy to work with, sometimes improper fractions are. So how do you do it if you're going the other way? Well, remember, this fraction line here means divide. So this is really saying 98 divided by 9. So how many times does 9 go into 98? Well, it goes 10 times. 10 times 9 is 90. There's a remainder of 8. So the remainder goes on top as the numerator, and we always keep the same denominator. 98 over 9, 10 and 8/9, they're the same number, they have the same value. So let's try a harder question. How many whole numbers lie between negative 23 over 7 and 31 over 8? So this will be much easier if we convert to mixed numbers. So 7 goes into 23 3 times, remainder 2. We always keep the same denominator. So negative 23 over 7 is just going to be the same as negative 3 and 2/7. 31 over 8. Well, 8 goes into 31 3 times, remainder 7. And we keep the same denominator. So this question's asking how many whole numbers lie between negative 3 and 2/7 and 3 and 7/8. Well, between these two numbers, we would have negative 3. That's more than negative 3 and 2/7. We'd have negative 2. Negative 1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. All of these whole numbers are between these two mixed numbers. 4 I don't include because it's more than 3 and 7/8. So you can see there are 3, 6, 7 such numbers, and that's our final answer. All right, let's now look at converting fractions and decimals. So we're going to look first at converting a fraction to a decimal and then decimals to fractions. So how do you convert fractions to decimals? Well, we need to know about the place value of decimals. So this first column after the decimal point is tenths, then hundredths, then it would go thousandths, and so on. What I want to do is I want to take this fraction and make its denominator a power of 10. So I can arrange the numbers into columns. So powers of 10 are 10, 100, 1,000, and so on. So 2 goes into 10. So I can make the bottom 10 by timesing by 5. What you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. See, a half and 5/10 are the same. They are equivalent fractions, both equal to the same number, same position on the number line. But because this is tenths, I have 5/10. All I have to do is put a 5 in the tenths column. You probably already knew that a half was 0.5, but that's why it is. So what about 9/20? I need to find an equivalent fraction whose denominator is a power of 10. Now 20 does not go into 10, but 20 goes into 100, which is a power of 10. So to go from 20 to 100, I need to times by 5. What you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. So if I times the bottom by 5, I must times the top by 5. So I have 45 hundredths. So I want the last number to be in the hundredths column, which is the second column point. So I just write the number in like this, 0.45. So 9/20 and 0.45 are equivalent. They're equal. Same position on the number line and everything. What about if I start with a decimal and I want to go to a fraction? Well, I just use what I know about place value. This is saying 2 is in the hundredths column. So the denominator is going to be 100, and I just write on top the number without a decimal point. This is 2 hundredths, or 2 over 100. You may need to simplify. So when we're giving an answer as a fraction, our answer needs to be simplified. See, 2 and 100 are both even, so I can simplify by dividing top and bottom by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, 100 divided by 2 is 50. We're going to do the same thing over here. 0.88. Because the last digit is in the hundredths column, I put 100 on the bottom of the fraction. On top, I write the number without the decimal point. So 0.88 is 88 over 100. Now I simplify. 88 is divisible by 4. 88 divided 4 is 22. 100 divided by 4 is 25. So my final answer is 22 over 25. This fraction cannot be simplified because 22, 25 have no factor in common other than 1. So we're done. These two are both equal. They're exactly the same number. All right, let's now look at working with percentages. So percent means per 100. So percentages are really just fractions with denominator equal to 100. So 30% means 30 over 100. 4% means 4 over 100. So please make sure if you're giving an answer as a fraction, it's simplified. 30 over 100 is 3 over 10. I can simplify by dividing top and bottom by 10. 4 goes into 125 times. So 4 divided 4 is 1. 100 divided 4 is 25. So 3 over 10 is the same as 30%. 1 over 25 is 4%. What if I wanted to convert the percentages to decimals rather than fractions? Well, what we do when we're going from percent to a decimal is divide by 100. See, 30 is the same as 30.0. Dividing by 100, you move the decimal point 2 spots to the left. So 30%, which is 3 over 10, is also equal to 0.3 or 0.30. What about 4%? Well, 4 is the same as 4.0. I want to move the decimal point 2 spots left. So I can move it 1 to the left, but I've run out of numbers. I need to move it 1 more to the left, so I put in a 0 as a placeholder. Decimal point ends there. 4% is actually the same as 0.04. All of these are equivalent. 0.04, 1 over 25, and 4%. So what about going the other way? How do I convert 11 over 20 to a percentage? Well, percentages are just fractions with denominator 100. So all I need to do is find an equivalent fraction whose denominator is 100. So to go from 20 to 100, you times by 5. What you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. I times the top by 5. So 11 over 20 is 55 over 100, which is 55%. That's what 55% means, 55 over 100. If I want to go from a decimal to a percent, instead of dividing 100, I times 100. So when you times 100, this time I'm going to move the decimal point 2 spots to the right. So I end up with 42, and I just whack a percent on the end. So 0.42, 42% are the same number. All right, let's look at a couple of word problems. So in a class of 28 students, 75% of them like soccer. How many students is this? So note, 75% is, of course, 75 over 100, but hopefully you remember 75 over 100 is the same as 3/4. 75% is 3/4. This is saying 3/4 of the class like soccer. So I want 3/4 to equal something over 28. So, to go from 4 to 28, you times by 7. What you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. So 3 times 7 gives 21. 3/4 of 28 is 21. So there must be 21 people in the class who like soccer. Let's look at another question. In another class of 30 students, 18 of them have Spotify. What percentage of the class is this? So this is a whole bunch of words basically telling you I want to make 18 over 30 into a percentage. Now, the problem is, if I try to make denominator 100, that's really hard. What do I times by 30 to get to 100? Well, that's tough. But we can simplify this fraction. 18 over 30 can be simplified because 18 and 30 have a common factor of 6. So 18 divided by 6 is 3. 30 divided by 6 is 5. So now it's going to be a lot easier to convert this one to a percentage than it was this one, because 5 goes into 100. 5 goes into 100 20 times. So I'm going to times bottom by 20. What I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. I'm going to times the top by 20. So 3 times 20 is 60. 18 over 30, 3 over 5 are equal to 60 over 100, which is 60%. So that means 60% of the class have Spotify. So hopefully in all of this, you've seen it's really important to know your times tables. I can't overstate how important it is you know your times tables to do things with fractions. All right, thank you so much for tuning into this video. Best of luck in your test, but you will ace it. You're a star. This has been the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Have a great day.